Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I just want you to know something. I'm old. Let me tell you what that means. There you go. Let me tell you what that means to me. Is that I have been in many auditoriums and with many groups. When I was a young child, I could see a man by the name of Nelson Roark singing for the little group as we began to build there in Florida. And I was fascinated as a boy by Nelson Roark because he was the first man I ever knew that was bald. I had no idea I'd joined the club. But I remember him singing and with such enthusiasm. I remember being with a little guy about this tall named Dwayne Garden, who was responsible for teaching so many song leaders in the western part of the United States, especially in California, and he'd always start the song that right there. That's where you go. And he was an amazing man. And I got to sing with him and appreciate his worship, and so many others, Welton Lockhart, Nick, Bill Nicole, and so many others that impacted me. And when I think back on my life and the times that I worshiped with brethren, they had a huge impact on me and what it means to come together with our brethren to worship God. Guess what? That right there, what Drew did for us today, fits into any of that. So thank you, my brother. It's always a pleasure. But he led 3 of my favorite songs back to back. I mean, come on. Anyway, good to have you here. Glad you're with us today. I kind of want to start where we started last week, and that is in John 13. So if you would, open your Bibles to John 13. As I said last week, this is it is the longest section of continuous teaching and continuous dialogue that we have of Jesus. This is this last discourse. It goes from chapter 13 all the way to 17, which ends in a prayer. And there's a lot of things that are covered in here. It is the night he is betrayed. We are only hours from the cross. And you really get that sense in the first few verses of John 13 as he says, "Now before the feast of Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God." Here we are at the crux of this, and you see all these forces that are coming together in this focus point at this time. All these events coming together. And here he is going to have this last discussion, private moment with the disciples to teach them, to prepare them, to frame the mission that they're going to have this beautiful prayer, the longest we have of Jesus in John 17. So many things are going to go on this night. And they go to this room to partake of the Passover. And as they are going into the room, there is a major disruption. The tradition that had been kind of developed from the time of Moses, if you recall that when the Passover was instituted, God said there will come a time in which your children will ask the question, "Why are we doing this?" And that you will answer, "Because of the deliverance from the Egyptians, from bondage, and all the things that go with that." By the time Jesus is on the scene, that had become a tradition to make sure that at some point in time during the Passover feast was done. And the most junior member of the group that was eating together was the one that was designated to ask the question. Often they would invite someone like a rabbi to come and have the supper with them so that the rabbi could answer the question. So you had the most junior, why are we doing this? And the most senior would respond, God's deliverance of the children of Israel. But these disciples, because everyone else in the room was gone, who was going to be the junior member? Who was going to take that role of the child? And there is this scramble, it would appear, because this table is a low table with cushions around it, and you ate leaning on one arm and eating with one hand. And there appeared to have been kind of this confusion and this scramble for who was going to get what spot at the table and who was going to take. And you see all this going on, and maybe John and James bickering about who was going to be where, and all this is going on at the table. And this is the last time Jesus is going to be able to speak, and this is what's going on. Now, we have the events that are about to take place, and we're going to talk about the rest of John 13 in just a moment. But I want you to picture this just for a minute as Jesus watches as they gather around this table. And this is what's going on as they're kind of pushing and shoving each other. And now freeze that image in your mind. Hit the pause button. Here we are, the night Jesus is going to be betrayed. And maybe Jesus realizes something at this moment. Maybe Jesus realizes he's made a mistake. Why pick these 12? Is this the best they can do? Jesus has made a terrible mistake. Now, of course, you realize I'm using this just simply as a device here. He, of course, made no mistake. But as I look at it from outside and I see the behavior of these disciples this night, clearly he has made a mistake. Picking these 12, these men, many of them fishermen, and he is going to charge them with the future teaching of the greatest story ever told. Surely he's made a mistake. Take Peter. Peter, the kind of spokesman, or at least the guy who speaks first anyway, of this group. Who is he? Well, we know first off that one of the first encounters Jesus has with him as he is teaching from the boat, and he tells Peter to cast out his net and gathers in all these fish, and he says to Jesus, "Depart from me, I'm a sinful man, O Lord. You don't want to be associated with me. I'm the wrong guy." And he's going to be the spokesman? How about the Mount of Transfiguration? That as Jesus appears with Moses and Elijah, that the best that Peter can say is, what we need to do is build 3 tents here and just stay here. Because he didn't have anything else to say, but he's got to say something. How about his failure to walk on the water as he lets the waves and the wind make him afraid? And he is chastised again by Jesus as he says, "Where is your faith?" How many times is Peter rebuked and brought to humility in terms of what he has said or what he has done? When Jesus is saying, I am going to, the first time he really enumerates the idea of going to Jerusalem and suffering and dying and raising on the third day, Peter takes him off to the side and says, have you lost your mind? What plan is that? And Jesus has to say to him, get behind me, Satan. Jesus picked the wrong guy. The wrong guy. This night, he is going to betray Jesus, denying him. He says, I would never deny you. I'd never deny you. I'd never deny you. No, no, no. But before the sun rises, the sun's already set. Before the sun rises and wakes up the chickens, he'll deny him 3 times. Jesus picked the wrong guy. And that night, as they scramble for their place at the table, it's clear. Peter's a bad pick. James and John, not much better. If you're going to have a cohesive unit, you're going to have people that are going to work together. You don't want James and John to be a part of the group. Because what are they thinking of? They're thinking about how to get ahead. They've had this discussion before about who's going to be greatest and all this. And in fact, if it wasn't the mother that initiated the conversation, or did James and John put her up to it, I don't know. But their mother gets involved. My daughter played softball. I'll tell you one thing you never want to do. Get the parent involved. Coach, why didn't you have her pitching? Why didn't you, she should change her place in the batting order? You know, no. Here comes mom before Jesus. Grant me a boon. Make my sons the left and right hand as you come into your kingdom. And Jesus says, are they able to drink of the cup that I'm going to be drinking? We'll come back to that point in a minute, but clearly these men are divisive in this group. They are a bad pick. How about Matthew? Matthew chapter 9 begins, Matthew chapter 10 begins with Matthew recording the picking of the 12 disciples. And every time that Matthew gives you the list, he always very specifically says, Matthew the publican, Matthew the tax collector, Matthew the traitor. That's basically what it meant, because he worked for the Romans. And everybody in the community despised the tax collectors. They could extort, they could steal, they did all kinds of things. Not that Matthew did that, we don't know. But Matthew's a bad choice. If the community sees Matthew involved with these people that are following Jesus around, it's going to immediately alienate one whole group of the community. Now, if Matthew is going to be part of the group, Jesus needs to go to him at night sometime and say, hey, look, we're slipping out of town. If you want to meet us at the crossroads, maybe we're going to go where nobody knows you. Everything will be cool. Middle of the day. At his table where he was working, Jesus says to Matthew, follow me. And he gets up and goes right in front of everybody. And then that night, he invites people to dinner, has Jesus come and share this meal. Who could he invite? The only people he could invite is other publicans. Nobody else would associate with him. And other people known as sinners. Oh, me. Talk about a PR nightmare. Matthew is a bad pick. He's a bad pick because of another pick that's part of the group. A man by the name of Simon the Zealot. You could have said something like Simon the freedom fighter. But the Romans would probably call him Simon the terrorist. associated with a group that hated the Romans so bad that they were known to have assassins kill Roman soldiers that had been found someplace unprotected. That was the group Simon was a part of, the super patriot. And over here is Matthew, the traitor. Put these two guys at the table? Oh, me. He's made a terrible mistake picking these guys. And this night, this very night where he has so much to say to them, isn't it obvious as they jostle and push each other around for a position at the table? Jesus made a mistake. No, he didn't. Of course he did. But it's important to see why. Do you know why he picked Peter, James, and John? Men that probably had such thick provincial accents that when Peter appeared before the Sanhedrin, they knew where he was from just by his speech. Do you know why he picked Matthew and Simon and all the rest? There's one simple answer. They were the best he could get. They were the best. Would he have liked Joseph of Arimathea? Would he have liked the mayor of a town or the leading businessmen of the town? Surely that would have helped the public relations side of it, but no. I'll tell you, the best he could get was Peter, James, John, Philip, and the rest. Now, what does that mean for us? What it means for us is that these flawed, difficult men, with the gospel in their hand and an understanding of who Jesus is and what he did, would later be accused of turning the world upside down. Peter, Matthew, Simon, turn the world on its head because they were empowered with something called the gospel. Now take a look at who we are. Got lots of flaws. Got lots of challenges. Got things in our life we're not too proud of. Things in our life that we wish it had not happened, or maybe things that we wish we had done that we never did. And we may think that because of who we are and because of what has happened in our past, that somehow we are incapable. Take a look at Peter. Take a look at James. Take a look at John. These men made a difference. If they can, so can we. Each one of us. Now, unfreeze the events of that night as they're jostling for position and trying to find the place. And here's the problem, because I talked about the two positions and the two roles in this night, is that you have the junior member that nobody wants to be, that asks the question, why are we doing this? And then, of course, Jesus would fulfill the role of the rabbi to say, and this was the traditional way this meal was taken. But there actually should have been another role fulfilled, and that is the role of a slave. Because they're coming in off the streets, and the streets are the same. You can just, when you talk about the streets in this context, you're talking about the inside of a corral or some other animal place, that there's animal poop everywhere, But not only that, but it also acted as a sewer for the people. Not only that, but it also acted as a garbage dump. Throw your trash out in the street, and you have to walk through this in sandals. You need to talk to, they needed Bobby. You need to get the big boots things. Think of the opportunity you missed there, brother. But they're walking through this in sandals. And then when you come in and you're having the meal, where's your feet? Your feet, because you're reclining at the table on one arm and eating with one hand, your feet are near somebody's face. So the slave, not even a guest, should be at the door cleaning their feet. But nobody was willing to take that role. We quit reading at bottom of verse 3. Now, if you pick it up at verse 4, Jesus got up from supper, laid aside his garment, and taking a towel, he girded himself. Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. There's an interesting quality of the way this is written. If you could imagine the scene for a minute as the disciples have been jostling around and arguing about who gets what position and who's the greatest and all the things that would go on. Without a word, Jesus gets up and goes and takes off his outer garment. And about this time, probably the disciples are going, what's he doing? And then by the time he has put the towel around him and is pouring the water into the basin, I imagine the conversation had completely stopped. And you hear the water splashing into the basin. Jesus going to the first of the disciples, putting the bowl down and beginning to wipe the filth off their feet. Imagine that was one very quiet room. How could Jesus take the role of a slave? Peter can't stand it. Peter has to say something. Can't stand it. You're not, in his initial question is very simple. It's, Lord, my feet? My feet? Jesus tells him, just hold on, I'll explain this. He says, no, not going to do it. He says, then you don't have any part. You can leave. And of course, Peter swings the other way and goes, oh, you wash my head. Hang on. I'll explain. But that's not the remarkable one. The remarkable one was when he came to Judas. He washes Judas's feet. I'm not sure my human heart can understand that. Because he knew who Judas was and what he was about to do. In fact, the very next discussion that comes after he explains that you should wash one another's feet in the terms of serving one another and all the things that should involve this, and that the discussion that they're having about who is the greatest is the wrong discussion completely. But somewhere in that event, he washes Judas's feet. Who should I refuse to serve? Who is not good enough for my best effort? Is it somebody that said something mean to me? Or maybe took my parking space in the parking lot. He washed Judas's feet. One of the main things that he's going to say in this long discourse, he's speaking of love. You need to love one another. Love one another. Love one another and prove to be my disciples. Love. Look, bottom line. If Peter, James, John, Simon, Matthew can be disciples of Jesus and be given this incredible mission to spread the good news, the gospel of Jesus to the world, so can we. But I'm going to tell you what it's going to take. It's going to take us thinking of ourselves as servants. We think of ourselves as people that can act for the benefit of others. And it doesn't matter who they are, where they come from, what they've done in the past. We can do that role too. From there, Jesus teaches them, I'm going away. Where are you going? You'll understand later. We don't know where you're going. How do we know the way? As he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, answering their question. And then he ends this whole discourse, and I'm cutting all the way to the John 17, to this. Verse 20 of John 17 says, I'm not just praying, this is part of that long prayer by Jesus. I'm not praying just for these disciples in the room, but I'm praying for all those who believe through the message they will share. That they all may be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they may be one in us, that the world may believe that you have given your Son, that we are from you. Do you know who he just prayed for that night? He prayed for you. Will we step up? Will we play our role? Will we act the role of the servant? Will we carry the message forward? That is the question. How can we serve your needs as part of this great message that has gone out to change the world? If you're not a child of God, we'd urge you to make that choice. Or if there's some way we can encourage your walk, why don't you come up front while we stand and sing our invitation song?